Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the Fibonacci sequence today, which is like one of my favorite subjects to talk about. If you don't know by now, it's just the codes, languages, and symbols of the Renaissance era and the universe that goes with the universal laws that we are taught today in today's world. It's just the languages of the metaphysics has no longer been popular. It's super popular in the sense where it's hidden. I believe that these secrets of the universes, these languages of patterns of the yin and yang, patterns of polarity, patterns of relativity, which simply means that in order to fully understand the whole of this universe, a human being should be trained to understand what's on the surface and also what's underneath. And I believe that a lot of what we've been taught in our society today is mainly about knowledges that you can only observe, and nothing about the metaphysics, which are mostly and commonly the things that you cannot observe. But the metaphysics follow a particular pattern that's incredibly easy to follow. It's a sequences of practices that you yourself undertake, so that over the years, one, sometimes three, sometimes 10 years, it'll take for you to fully understand how to detect these patterns on your own. Much like anything that you study or skills that you practice and develop over the year, it's just you become better at seeing these sequences, and over time you'll be able to come up with your own sequences, be able to decipher some of the patterns of the universes that you see from symbols that people throw at you, whether it's programming, whether it's poetry, because underneath all things in this universe is a universal language of patterns that revolves around this idea called the yin, or the yin and yang, or opposites. Okay, we also call it polarity. From that type of philosophy, you have adages and proverbs like to be or not to be, which is also a paradox. To be and not to be, that's more a contradiction, which to me is even more powerful than to be or not to be. To find oneself, one must lose himself. Yeah, that's another paradox. Or that's another proverb that was created out of the understanding of the universe. Or one of my favorites, one that many people don't understand. If you look through Wikipedia, you scour through Quora.com, and I just realized that in our capitalistic society, people do not understand these paradoxes and contradiction. Only 1 out of 1,000 would actually get this, and it's generally older people. Even 1 out of 10,000 adults, so to speak. So it's not a common science or knowledge that you can teach. You can find being taught. It's probably more or less in occult sciences, cults and or whatnot. And as we all know, they have been demonized. So a lot of us kind of steer clear of a lot of cults that we hear of and things like that. But I suspect that a lot of occult societies are teaching occult sciences that are extremely powerful, that are harmless, that aren't as freaky and spooky as what you have been programmed to believe on TV. And it's no one's really programming you. It's just how we were brought into this universe, where it's common for people not to know this knowledge. Then later on in life, it becomes more common. I want to say you're looking at about another 300 to 500 years towards that era where the knowledges of the universe is going to be common. Most people are going to understand the philosophies of the yin and the yang, and they're at that time, you're going to have a society that's going to be filled with Renaissance-like men who just understands patterns, and true perpetual technology is going to be created out of this process, because by then we'll have the philosophy in place for people to develop a sciences of perpetual energy that really taps into the ideals of opposites. And when you're looking in the holy grail of creating extra energy or infinite energy, really goes back to understanding the ideas of opposites and how you can extract everything from the nothingness, which is a big lesson that was taught by this guy by the name of Walter Russell back in the 1800s. Nikola Tesla, if you really want to understand his work and his science, practice opposites. Writing left-handed, walking backwards, perhaps being suspended upside down a little more. They're writing upside down, just being able to trick your brain into doing things opposite to what it was used to, so that when you do that, you round off your crystal, you wholesome your crystal, you make it whole again. And when you start to make things your crystal whole again, you'll be able to see information from the ether or the emptiness around you that you normally would not be able to see. Okay? All right, Fibonacci sequences, and this is created by you, by yours truly, me. Fibonacci sequence is a sequence of number that that is produced by adding two numbers to getting the next number in that sequence. Okay, so if I add 0 as the beginning number, 0 is always the beginning number. And if I take 1 as my starting number, I take the number 1, which is the present number, I add that to 0. Now I have which is the old number, or the beginning number, I have the new number. Okay, so you have your old, your present, your new. Now, I take the new, which is now the present. I add that to the old, right? This is because it constantly alternates position. So this one was a new, now it's an old. This is the new present, and this is the new. So you got 1, the former two numbers, adding together, you have 2. 2 plus 1, you get 3. 3 is the new one, right? 2 is the present, 1 is the old. Now they all shift forward. So 2 is now the old, 3 is the present. You add the old to the present, you get the new. You see that? Old, present, new. So present is what you're in now. New is in the future. Old, you could say, is in the past. If you guys notice that, isn't that what life's all about? What's in your present? What's in your past? What's in your future? Does that not feel like the power of 3? Something we also call the Holy Trinity? You repeat this process, this triangular process of the old, the present, then the new. You add now the old, the present, and now you get the new, the 13. You take the 13, which is now the present, add that to the old, you get 21. So you constantly get this pattern repeating itself to produce a longer and longer and longer sequence. If you read Wikipedia and you read their interpretation of it, and there are a couple of rules that they say right here. Fibonacci sequence is a series of numbers where a number is the addition of the last two numbers. Last two numbers starting with 0 and 1. This is the Fibonacci sequence. But this pattern repeats itself in other types of sequences, and not necessarily just the Fibonacci sequences. Okay? Because this pattern is just called the Fibonacci sequence for the person they decide, established society decide to give credit to, which to me absolutely makes no sense. It's just a sequence of number, and just digging into it, I wasn't too impressed as to their expression and their what Wikipedia had explored and tailored about the Fibonacci sequence. I wasn't too impressed by that, because in it says it should have been a little more general in that sense, where you could say that the golden spiral, which the sequence of number produce, is a series of number where a number is the addition of the last two numbers. It should really end there, which is this golden spiral. But since they're calling it the Fibonacci sequence, because this really doesn't have to start with 1, it could really start with any number. Because if you start with any number, you're going to produce that same effect. If I were to choose to start with the number 7, you're going to produce that same pattern with any number you plug in there, whether it be a number 1 or a number 7 or a number 1 million. Okay? And it still produced the golden spiral, which is a very symmetrical expansion, symmetrical expansion of the spiral, so to speak. It's a non-destructive expansion and decompression or compression. And that's what makes the Fibonacci sequence so powerful because it's extremely symmetrical. And as this number grows out, it produces this type of a pattern right here. Right? Here it is. If you look into the middle, you start with 0, 1 plus 1, right? Well, 1 plus 0, you get 1. 1 plus 1, you get 2. 2 plus 1, you get 3. 3 plus 2, you get 5. 5 plus 3, you get 8. 8 plus 5, you get 13. So you follow and you take that point here and you draw it along the outside edge, you'll be able to produce a spiral. If you notice closely, the spiral at the center isn't as symmetrical because the golden ratio in this particular instance is only achieved as the numbers get larger and larger. Okay, but that's a starting point though. Now I did our own sequences over here, starting with the number 7. And when I did it with the number 7, I was able to produce the exact same effect. And now I'm going to pull it to you. See, the effect of comparing my sequence, the JxonDany sequence, 0, 7, 7, 14, 21, 35, right, compared to this layout right here. See, they're exactly the same. And if you divide 0, 7, 7, 14, 21, 35, 56, 91 by 7, you'll arrive and deduce back to this number, the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? Fibonacci sequence is only different from my sequence because it starts with the number 1. But now you can see that the expansion is just proportional, and therefore you're able to get that same effect. And that's why my illustration over here, or my creation starting with the 7, is exactly the same as if a sequences of number producing the pattern of the golden spiral start with the number 1. Okay? See, the origins of the Fibonacci sequence introduced a series of number as the Fibonacci sequence in this book. Fibonacci was a member of an Italian trading family in the 12th and 13th century. Being part of a trading family, mathematics was an integral part of the business. Fibonacci traveled throughout the Middle East, and India was captivated by the mathematical ideas from his travels. His book, Liber Abaci, was a discourse on the mathematical methods and commerce that Fibonacci observed during his travels. This is very vague. I don't like this explanation as to why this person deserves for a sequence of patterns that denotes the golden spiral to be named after this guy called the Fibonacci sequence, which leaves us with a series of numbers that should have really said, hey, you don't have to start with the number 1. So that's why I can't really give this dude the Fibonacci a credit, because his definition of the series really, and his connection as to the significance of the Fibonacci sequence isn't impressive. Look, Fibonacci discovered the sequence by posing the following question. If a pair of rabbits is placed in an enclosed area, how many rabbits will be born there if we assume that every month a pair of rabbits produce another pair, and that rabbits begin to bear young 2 months after their birth? You see, this is a mathematical enigma. It's just the same kind of pattern that school gives us, which is really unhealthy for us, because it's not using simplicity to teach us. It's just starting immediately with just an enigma. It's like stuff that is very incredibly impractical, things that you would never pose in your entire life. And sure, it separates the guys who understand this patterns through practices. Maybe he inherit the genetics of his dad or his grandfather who loves puzzles, or his mother on his mother's side, or just was brought up by people who loves puzzles and little questions like this. But the reality of it is even written down here. Though Fibonacci's question concerning the rabbits is in an unrealistic scenario, the sequence can be observed in nature. You see what I'm saying? It's like if you read through this portion right here, it's just hogwash, right? So it's just a bunch of people who really don't know the significance of the Fibonacci sequence, or really it's just the golden spiral sequence, okay? Or the golden spiral pattern, I should say. And though Fibonacci's question concerning the rabbit's an unrealistic scenario, the sequence can be observed in nature. So all they're relegating this to is, oh, the sequence is important because you can see it in nature. I'm not too impressed by that either. While the series of numbers from this simple brain teaser may seem inconsequential, it has been rediscovered in an astonishing variety of forms, from branches of advanced mathematics to applications in computer science, statistics, nature, and agile development. You see, it's not quite simple. It's not something that the average person can readily identify with. So to me, I call it hogwash, because something isn't brilliant until you can easily communicate it and interpret it, translate it to even a kid. So to me, I truly believe in teaching people sciences of complexity and using simplicity, because that's the paradox and the contradiction that we got to stop limiting our kids to believing that contradictions and paradoxes are a mystery, when in fact it should be the languages of the universe that should be taught in elementary school at the get-go. Teach them that left cannot exist without right. Right cannot exist without left. Up cannot exist without down. Down cannot exist without up. It's just the basics of the universe that we eventually will understand hundreds of years from now, towards the cycles where the ending of capitalism is going to happen, which I predict is going to be 2520. Okay, which is the completion. 2520 adds up to 9, which completes the realm of capitalism, in my opinion, and that's based off of my another pattern that I had detected within the systems of the pentagram, or the understanding of the number 5, which is the popular number that's running our society today. Okay, what else do I have here for you guys? So I wrote down the Fibonacci sequence here. I created my own sequence. I called it the JxonDany sequence. How egotistical, right? My point in showing you guys today that you can start with any number, okay, despite whether or not Wikipedia tells you that. And another pattern that I had detected was, look, the sequence is formed, I was telling you earlier, by utilizing old, present, and new. And to repeat, you'll see a repeating pattern of old, present, old, present, old, present, old, present, to forming the new. So what we're doing is that we are utilizing what we call a paradoxical way of progressing. What I mean by that is that this philosophy is extremely important, because it's a common philosophy back in the days that was readily understood by all the scientists. I wouldn't say scientists, I would say mystic, because today's scientists are limiting us to what's observable only, and they tell us you're cuckoo or you're crazy because you cannot visualize something, therefore it's not provable. Okay, but I could prove this to you over time, because I've been able to do that with my students, who essentially become my teacher. And how I can prove this to you is to help teach you how to read patterns, and within the next months, over the next couple of months or years, when you have become experienced and skilled enough, you'll be able to understand it, and it would be nearly impossible for me to convince you otherwise of this particular understanding, skill, this knowledge. I don't want to call it science. I just want to call it a universal knowledge that was popular before. It isn't popular now among the average human society, because what I believe is that it's mostly patented and buried, simply because there are plenty of reasons for things to be buried. We're in a society where patents is a popular thing. So if you have a curiosity as to why society would hide information like that from us, just think of it this way. The universe makes it so that your journey begins with not knowing. Everyone's different. There's different variations of not knowing, to knowing. Because if you had been brought into this universe all knowing, then the journey, the exploration, the mystery that the universe has to offer is no longer intriguing for you, and therefore there would be no journey. Okay, so underneath, that's really the reason for this. On the surface, you could say that there's a conspiracy going on, which is also true. But the reality is that they both are true, and they both are just illusions of our mind as the unfolding of our mind continues, because life, as you would discover later, is all happening in your head, and you are really imagining everything in front of you. Okay? All right, I want to close out with another pattern that I was able to create. Okay, so we know that. Let's go back over here. I wanted to drive home this point. This is this is the most important significance of the Fibonacci sequence. Okay, even though you won't find this in importance of Fibonacci sequence in Wikipedia or whatnot, I will give you one. Okay, not many of you will connect to this, but those who are have been on the path of spirituality, who's been working with universal understanding and the metaphysics, quantum physics and whatnot, and mainly self-taught from meditation, you'll get this. This should be an easy an easy set of things for you to understand. Okay. The biggest importance and significance of the Fibonacci sequence, or let's call this the golden spiral sequence or the JxonDany sequence, is that progression requires regression. You get it? If you're about the holy golden spiral, which is shown here, which is shown over here, right? If you're about the golden spiral, I'm going to point it out, it's this, right? You'll understand that a spiral represents a cycle. Down, like I'm just going to follow this spiral. I'm going down, up, down, up. It's a cycle. It's a pattern that's a symmetrical cycle, the most symmetrical cycle that the universe has to offer us. It's like it's synonymous with the circle or a sphere, which is like the perfect symmetrical shape you can have, you know, because the symmetry is perfect at every angle as long as you divide it from the center. Okay, down, up, or you could say left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay, but if you are omniscient and you're not seeing this image from just a cross-sectional perspective from your observational vantage point, and you're seeing it from every direction, what you should really be seeing is the expansion of a balloon, the collapsing of the balloon, expansion of the balloon, the collapsing of it non-destructively. So they're able to expand, collapse, like some toys that you would create that allows you to expand, collapse. You could mathematically sequence them out and build the joints so that the joints follow the sequence, and so that they fold, they collapse, and they expand in a way where the collapse and the expansion is incredibly symmetrical, perfectly symmetrical. Otherwise, the constant expanding, collapsing, expanding, collapsing of that particular toy or shape is going to damage over time as the joints wear out due to its imperfection or non-symmetry built up. Okay, so that's the significance, and how that applies to your everyday life is ubiquitous. It's the applications is infinite. Progression requires regression. Think about your relationship with your girl, right? To progress, you must go backwards. So when you reach a point in your relationship where you feel like you're regressing, just hang in there. Just know that the regression is the part of the overall progression. Okay? So that's same with your building your financial wealth. With your health, it's the same idea. Like you're going to the gym, you're building muscles, and then at the end of that, you're feeling tired. You kind of depleted your body. You've done so much. And then you just relax and understand that if you were to stop after that workout, it's not going to be the end of your growth. The regression is for you to take a step back to allow your body its natural ability to progress, to heal and then progress. Okay? The same thing with like learning anything in life. Like for you to be able to grow a knowledge, a skill, develop your skill, take a step back. Don't keep piling more and more knowledge on top of that, because your brain is going to collapse. Because progression requires regression. So you need to take a step back, let it go, and trust the sciences of paradox, contradictions, opposites, relativity implying that letting it go might sound ridiculous from one perspective, meaning, oh dude, I'm going to stop studying. How is that going to benefit me? See, letting it go, not studying is so backwards to us in gaining something, because we don't teach our kids that. We always teach kids to always push forward, don't make mistakes, don't regress. Every once in a while you have a wise teacher who said, hey, regression is a part of progression. Okay? So that, I hope that helps you guys a lot, because to me that was super, super important, because this falls and it aligns with all of the stuff that I've been talking about this past 10 years, and you guys can go back to those videos, okay? I'm just a lot more polished now after 10 years of this type of practice, okay? The last but not least is something I had discussed earlier, which should really be the very first one. Let's go up here. It's a series of numbers consisting of old present to form new. Okay, so you see how the old makes the new? So it keeps going over and over and over again. Now check this out. The mapping that we did over here is just a mapping. It's just an expression of how this number looks, this Fibonacci sequence, like, or this JxonDany sequence, or just, I want to call it the pattern. This golden spiral mathematical sequence, you know? It's just like, if I were to take, and then I'll explain it to you this way. The number 7 or the number 1, you could really start with any number like I had explained earlier. The number 7 here, right? When you, let's jump back over here. This is easier for you guys to see. Let's make it even easier where you start with the number 1. Here we go. Okay, right, let me see if I can blow this up for you guys. For you ladies and gents. Alrighty, that didn't work out the way I had planned it. Alright, so it starts here with 1. 0 is right in the center. That makes sense, right, guys? I'm not going to argue with that, or I don't have to further explain how the beginning of things should start at 0. You could do -1 and it works the other way. And then if you do -1, let's just have this, instead of going to the right and spinning towards the right side first, you can go the opposite way just to express negative numbers, and negative really just expresses direction of where the spiral is going to go. But realistically, this could easily be a positive and going the opposite direction, because it's all relative, but we're still producing the same pattern, okay? 1, you take 1, you add it to your right side adjacent to that, okay? And then you add these two together, the present and the former, you get the next one, which is the new is the 2. So you see, but if you were to add 1 and 2 and then put down which forms the next box, which is where the sides adds up to 3, you're following that same pattern where it's constantly going towards one side. You see what I mean? So it's going on a left spin, so to speak. It's twirling. You could say, I believe that's a centrifugal or centripetal. I believe it's centrifugal. I could be wrong. But all it's doing is it's spinning. You're just adding it to the side. One side consistently, just constantly adding a box to the side to grow. And if you look closely at the number 21 here, look at that. It's the addition of neutral, yin and yang, right? And that forms the next pattern, 21. You see that? So what they're doing is that, so this to me is just an illustration, a pattern that some guy had created. You know? It's just a particular pattern. It's particular, and this pattern can go any direction. If I decided, oh, you know what, I'm going to take this box, this 3, right, and flip it instead over to, this box 21, right, I'm sorry, take this, and instead move it over to this side, right, then all of a sudden I wouldn't have that golden spiral. And then the dynamics of the spiral would change. it would not be able to collapse non-destructively or expand non-destructively at that particular joint. It's going to get stuck, okay? So that's the idea of this. Oh, it might not necessarily, because it's still following a particular pattern, but what I'm trying to say is that the symmetry is no longer there. Perfect symmetry is no longer there. So what I'm telling you here is that they're just creating a pattern using number that looks cool, but in reality, it's just a pattern that someone had created. Nothing incredibly special in my opinion, but it looks really cool though, because you can take you can draw a curved line and connect all the endpoints, wherever they had connected. They had connect beginning at the corner, and constantly just follow this particular pattern towards the middle edge, so to speak, or wherever you want to define it from whatever perspective. So that's a particular pattern. This is another pattern I'm going to show you that I had created using the same logic of the golden spiral sequence, or the Fibonacci sequence, you can say. But I'm using the Fibonacci sequence, his number starting with 1, and I created my own pattern here, right? And this pattern to me really does a good job of expressing a different vantage point, okay? What I did on this particular side over here on this graph on the right side here is that I took the 2 points starting with 0 and I mapped it out on a graph, okay? Now the way I had it mapped out and drawn out falls into this philosophy called alternating cycle. And you guys have heard of alternating currents. It's the same exact idea that Nikola Tesla had envisioned. It's the same philosophy, meaning alternating. I mean, what does it mean? It's the alternating pattern between between the yin and the yang, or opposites, alternating between the yin and yang with implications of neutrality. Neutral is always going to be there. Positive, negative, neutral, yin, yang, neutral, red, yellow, or red, blue, or a color yellow would be regarded as neutral, because yellow is the closest descendant to white, and white generally is an incredibly neutral number color, because it creates all of the other color. But when it's against black, white represents the opposites to black. Okay, so therefore you get a lot of you get a lot of, I want to say, rivalry built out of things that are contrasting or stark contrast, which is, in this particular case, it's black and white. Okay. All right. So what I did was I took a sequence of a pair of numbers, utilizing this. The first one I did was using the numbers 0 and 0 to create my starting point, because I had told you earlier that the starting point should always be 0. In this particular case, the starting point is common for it to be 0. The next number on this list is 1. So you take 0 and 1, right? That's pretty easy to follow. The next number on this list to form 2, you take, what do? You add 1 to 1. And then the next sequence, you add 1 to 2. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create something for you guys to see in red. And remember, everything that I teach you guys in terms of pattern, they will always affirm one another. So what I teach you here, you don't understand. Go back to some of my other lessons, because they all connect. And that's why I believe that this science is a universal science, because what I'm teaching you, you could yourself validate any of what I teach you with all the other patterns that I have taught you. Whereby in school, what you have been taught, you have to really be validated by a particular book or what you were taught in school. But you don't know for a fact that what you were taught in school is I want to say, an ancillary program, meaning that it's a program designed to build a society a particular way, and you don't know for a fact that that is a knowledge or secrets of the universe that is as powerful as could be. We live in a society that boasts capitalism, boasts competition. Do you think that your school, your country, is going to teach you something that's going to take something away from them because of in this competitive environment? Heck no. You'll hear people say, "Yeah, we're teaching, we're advancing our sciences and whatnot." But the reality is that when they teach you good stuff, it's going to take away from them. That's why I believe that the programs that we've been getting in school is just programs that were designed to produce a certain set of civilization that keeps certain types of people in power, which is beautifully done. I have no problem with people doing it the way they do it. We live in a society of cycles, where to me, cycles the most important knowledge of the universe. And we are in an era where it's more popular to not know metaphysics than it is popular. Will that remain a constant? No. It's impermanent, meaning that that's popular now, but it doesn't mean that that's going to stay a constant. And the next cycle where the Renaissance knowledge becomes more popular, you're going to see people like myself surface with more of these type of patterns. And then take note of them, because it's super, super fun to connect all of the universe's puzzle pieces and get to the point where I want you guys all to be eventually to arrive at, is to connect with the idea that you are the God of all of this creation. And deep within, but because you are folded inside out, your godhood is stuck all the way inside, whereas your sense of not knowing and your sense of knowing what's on the surface, whether you're rich or not, it doesn't matter, because you could be as rich as you want and still not know this. Okay, so your sense of not knowing your own godhood is all the way on the surface, and we live by that philosophy, and we live by the philosophy of the surface of what we've been taught, because that's part of our environmental programming. Okay, so I know there's a lot to swallow here, so I'm just going to wrap this up with the final piece of this discovery. All right, so again, going back to this particular pattern, what I did here is I started with 0, 0, created that point right there on that graph. Then I connected, let's give it some color, 0 and 1. All right, let's follow it. Cool. That gives me another set, right? I'll just kindly highlight all of them for you. You see that? Oh, hang on a sec. Let me change that up. I'm going to zoom in for you guys too. Drop my mic on the ground. Let me do something that's kind of tap into my understanding. All right, I'm going to create this for you guys. You see what I'm saying? I'm just creating these sequences. Ew. Here it is. All right. And I like how, thanks, Alan. I mean, Alan actually was the person who told me, could you make your videos without all these crazy editing? Like, I'm tired of seeing people edit their process, is what he was telling me. And I was like, all right, cool. Then that makes it funner for me, because I don't have to do a lot of work, and I can get this done for you guys. 13 and 21. You know, that makes it tough. Let's make a bigger circle in this particular case. You know what? Just to keep it consistent, I'm going to do that over. There it is. It's 13 and 8. 13 and 21. 21, 24. What I'm doing is that I'm just showing you guys what's really going on here. So that's the pattern that we're producing, right? So it's telling you there's this constant cycle that's going on within this particular pattern, right? And I'm just highlighting the pair of points on this particular graph for you. all of these represents the pair of points that you see on this graph right here that I have. Let me zoom in on this. Right here. Okay. Now, if you notice here, I marked 0, 0 here, 1, 1. I also created down here. But I really, I didn't want to get too deep in there, mainly because you won't be able to see it. So I just started marking it higher. I started, if you look out here, I did 3, 5. 3 up, 5 to the right. Okay? 5 to the right. So we know the next number on top of 5, all right, is 8. Right? 8. The next number, 8, is 13. So I go 13 to the right. The next number here is 21. So 13 plus 21 equals 34. Okay, so I go 34 up. And then I go 55 to the right, and then go 89 to the top. You see that pattern that I created? And in creating this particular pattern, you see an ever expanding, because this number is going to get higher. This Fibonacci sequence is going to get higher and higher. And it's an ever expanding volume or sequences of number, okay? And this is how the pattern that I see in this particular mapping, all right? Now, I'm pretty sure you can draw a better one because I really just use a mouse to, I'll tell you, I press B. I kind of use the mouse and just kind of did one of those motion or movement. Or what I noticed while I did this is that if you put in 0, 1, what I did was that I alternated the ways in which this is graphed. I put in 5, 8, move her to the right 5. If you look close at the map, right here, down at the bottom. If I move over 5 points and go up 8, I end up here. Okay? Now I can go start at the bottom. The next one is 8 and 13, correct? 8 and 13. So I can move over. Now I could say I could go 8 up and 13 to the right. And this is my next point. 8 up, 13 to the right. Now on the next one I go 13 to the right and 21 up. See that? And on the next set is 21 and 34. I go 24 up and 34 to the right. So what it does there is that it's alternating. I'm also graphing it in an alternating manner. So there are two types of ways you can follow that. You could say, hey, just increase movement from your point, wherever you're at, and increase the next sequence of number and go in the opposite direction. Notice how I'll go from here, up, right, up. So here it's up 34, right 55, up 89. You can go in that particular pattern, or you can just map it from the beginning with each of these. 89, 41. 89, 147. 89 to the right, 147 to the top. So it really depends on how you see things, how you approach things. There's nothing wrong with either one. They're both just a relative expression of how patterns work, you know. That's it, guys. That's the Fibonacci sequence. I hope you you enjoyed it. If you have any other curiosity, any other things or symbols you want to decode, feel free. Hit me up and I'll do my best to tackle that for you. Okay? All right, that's it. Take care and you have a wonderful weekend.